Hi there, VMan75 here, and today in this video we're going to make a procedural gear. So we're going to start with a circle and we're going to use a rectangle as the teeth, and I'm going to show you how you can instance them on, ensure that they have correct rotation, and also Boolean them into a single shape. So let's start off by opening up the visualizer because we're going to need that, and I'm just going to dock it over here. And the next thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need a circle. So I'm going to create a circle node. I'm also going to need a draw node. In this case, I'm going to create a draw polygon. And I'm going to plug in my circle. And because every time I click, I want to ensure that I can see my draw polygon, because if I deselect it, it's going to be not visible anymore. So I'm going to pin the draw polygon node, and so now I can freely select nodes and always see my circle. The next thing I'm going to need is a rectangle, and if I plug that in, you'll be able to see that there's a rectangle there too. They're kind of similar size, so going to be quite a big tooth. I'm going to show you another node that is very important in Node, and it's called the draw combine layers. And the reason why this node is important is because when I draw a node, sometimes I want to see more than one node drawn. So like let's say the rectangle and the circle. So I'm just going to duplicate by pressing Control D the draw polygon. And if I plug both of these into the combine draw layer, I'm not seeing it update yet because I've pinned the original draw polygon. So I'm just going to pin the combine draw. You'll be able to see that I can see both shapes. So this allows us to combine the many draw nodes types so that the visualizer can have them all drawn together. And the way that the ordering works is that the first input is at the bottom, and then the input going down next is on top, and so on and so forth. So the last input would always be on top, although in this case you can't really see because nothing's shaded. Um, so what we want to do is I'll show you another draw layer, which is called the draw points. And this one, instead of drawing paths or polygons, what this one would do is it draws points. So you can see, I can see the points of the circle. And the reason why, even though I don't really need to see them, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because we're going to kind of instance the rectangle to these points. Okay, so I might just leave that there and maybe just mute it. We'll turn it off for now. All right, so I guess if we look at this rectangle is really quite big, so we might add a transform node. I could individually have changed the width and the height, but the transform node is just a bit easier because it allows me to change a lot of the values in one go. So I'm going to type in 0.1, 0.1 for my rectangle. And so that's now going to be a better size for a shape. Later on we can play with the values. And so how do I get these rectangles to stick to those points that I showed you earlier? I might just make the color different so they can stand out a bit more. Pink. So I want this rectangle I want to make as many rectangles as I have points, and I want them to eventually be oriented based on the normal of the circle. So one way that I can do that is I can use a node called instance on points, and this node has some inputs. So I've got instant point list, which is basically going to be the circle's points. I've got the prototype geometry, which would be the rectangle. And then I've got the instance rotations, which I'm going to have to create. I'm going to have to use a node which is going to find that the direction of the normals. And then I've got scale, which I'm not going to use in this case, but I could do that. And these are all lists inputs. So let's start to plug it in. So I want to plug in the circle into the instance points. I want to plug the rectangle as the prototype. And we'll see if we can get that to work to start with. I won't need this draw node now because I'm actually going to see the rectangles. Well, I'll leave it there. I'll just plug it in here. Okay, so there you can see that. And it's working, but obviously the problem is it's done exactly what I said it was going to do, and it's going to just instance a rectangle to every one of those points. But the problem is at the moment is that those rectangles, they're basically just using their own internal rotation value, and we don't want that. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to use another node, which is called get, or it's basically normal, get point normals. And what this node does is it just gets the normal direction of points on a shape. So I can plug that in, and then this node I can plug into the rotation. And there you go. So we've got that part working. I'm actually going to delete the points and the color. We don't really need that. That was just to explain what it's doing. Okay. So now we've got now we've got our circle and our gears. I'm not really happy about the size and shape of the gears. So what I might do is I'm going to come back over to my rectangle, and you can see that I've got a top and bottom width. So I'm going to create a float because I want to taper. I want to taper the either the top or the bottom. Doesn't matter. I can just rotate it. I'm just going to type in 0.5 because it's a percentage, and I'm going to plug that into the top, and you can see that it's going to taper it. Now I can go to my rotate, my transform, and I can just rotate that, and I can just start dragging it, and you can see that they're rotating quite minimally. Um, all the sliders in there, if you hold Shift, you get a bit more precision. If you hold Control Shift, you get lots of precision, and if you hold Control, you get less precision. But anyway, that's easy. I can just type in 90 here, and you can see that that's kind of worked out a bit better. I might also just move this on the, I can also go to the transform and move these individual teeth out a bit so I can get something like that, which is kind of cool. But the circle, I think the circle is a bit too small because I'm not getting a nice gap between the teeth. So what I might do is I might go to the circle and just create a float, and I'm going to adjust the radius. I'll start off with 100, and I'll just plug that in. Okay, so now that's a much bigger circle. I'm gonna maybe try, I don't know, 70. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now because we're using a Boolean, we actually, I might just scale the teeth up a little bit more so I can explain. I'll make these like, let's say 0.2. Actually, I'll leave that one at 0.1, and I'll make this one a bit longer. Because we're using a Boolean, we need them to kind of intersect, so that all of this internal stuff will be removed. So now that I've got all that working, this is all going to become one shape. So at the moment, I've got two polygon draw nodes, but once I Boolean these together, I'm not going to need two of these because they'll be one object. At the moment, the circle is an object and the instance rectangles are another object. So um, we're not going to need two draw nodes. That they're just a temporary thing while we're lining everything up. So now we're going to create a union, a Boolean union, and we're just going to plug the circle in, and we're going to plug the instance points in. And again, I can't see anything yet, and that's because I'm still drawing the combined layer, and I haven't plugged this into a draw node. I don't need, like I said, I'm not going to actually need the both draw nodes now because there's going to be one shape. So I'll just unplug that and maybe just plug this one in. And as soon as I do that, you can see that the Boolean has done its work and it's cut in, and you can see that I now have a single shape, which is cool, right? So I don't need any of this stuff, and that's all I need. So I've gone in, and let's go in there and name these so that they kind of make a bit more sense. So this is the radius. This is the taper, circle transform. A rectangle is named appropriately, I guess. So there you go. So what can we do with this at this point? Well, maybe I want to add in more teeth or less teeth. And because this is a procedural system, I can make another integer, and I'll call this, we'll just call it teeth. In actual fact, it's the resolution of the curve, but it would service the same purpose. So I'm going to type in 12, and I'm going to connect that. And so when I begin to change this now, you can see that I can adjust how many teeth I have, which is great because it's all procedural and everything is passing right through to the graph. And so now the next thing I might want to do is I might just turn this stuff off. I might go in and add a color constant. We'll make it like a nice gray color. Currently Node only does flat shading when it comes to its vector stuff. So I'm going to plug that into the fill color, and there we go. So I could animate my teeth, but what I think would be more interesting in this case would be to have it rotate. Okay, so how could I make it rotate? Well, there's lots of ways I could make it rotate, but I probably want to make it rotate at this point because this is where it's all been combined as a single shape. Um, so I'm going to use a transform points. A transform points, it's almost a bit like a freeze transformation where I can get a shape at its current state and then add a transform node to it. So I'm going to plug that into the list and then plug that back into my draw. And then here, I don't have any attributes that I can control, but what I can do is I can throw in another transform node. I can plug that in, and now when I rotate, you can see I can rotate that here. So I could rotate that by keyframing it. Or another way, I could just come in here and add in a frame node inside of my rotate, which will be 1 degree per frame. So if I rotate it now, you can see that my gear is spinning. If I didn't want to keyframing it would probably be the simplest solution, but if I wanted to keep it all procedural, I might want to create a float and call it speed, and then a multiply node, and I'll plug my frame node in here and my speed in here. And if I want it to be double the frame rate, so when it's on frame 1, I might want it to be rotated 2 degrees, so I could type in 2, and I could replace that input. And now the gear will spin at twice the speed. Or I could just come in here and just get my slider and increase it to whatever I want. So maybe I want it to be a lot faster. So that is kind of the process of how you could create something using Booleans. There are other Boolean types. There's difference, union. Let's have a quick look. So if we go into geometry, we've got Boolean intersection, Boolean subtract, Boolean union. There's also another, it's not a Boolean, but it's called a combine, which is useful, where you might want to kind of keep an inner circle. You can also, if I don't want to remake this shape, it obviously won't be procedural, but if I wanted to keep this shape forever, I can export it. So I can, sorry about that, I can export it, export shape, and I can just click on that and export it. The format is, I've just made it up. It's an XML format, but I've put an S in front of it for shape. And I can export this out to shapes. I'll just call it test here and save it. And so let's say I go to a new scene. I can now load that shape. Oh, I think I forgot to click the export button. So I needed, after I clicked the path, I also needed to, but I've got one that's already saved anyway. So I can import this gear and I can draw that. And then I've got my gear back, which is a bit of a different gear, but it's the same concept. So what I forgot to do is when I exported out my shape, I set the path, but I forgot to click the export button. But essentially, that's how you can make a Boolean. And if you have a look, it does a really nice job of, if I look at the points, it does a really nice job of Boolean the object quite nicely. So if I was to combine these, you can see it does a very nice job. The Booleans are quite good. And I'll just change the color so we can see that quite clearly. Make those green this time. Oh, and I'll swap that around. The dots are on the top. So yep, so it does quite a nice job with our booleans. So that was just an example of how we could make something like a gear using booleans inside of Noded. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.